Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
You want to start thinking about your organization and maybe your equity journey, what you've thought about equity in general, equity in tech. I want to welcome everyone to the Community IT webinar, Equity Guide for Nonprofit Tech. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT. I'll be the moderator today. At Community IT, we think a lot about technology. Of course, we're technologists and admin and techie people in general. And we think a lot about ethics. We only serve nonprofits, so we're kind of in tune with our nonprofit clients. Think a lot about, how things work and what is happening to the community. But I have to admit that before seeing this guide, I hadn't really thought about applying an equity lens to technology in general and to how we were using technology. So I'm really excited about this webinar today. So I would call myself, myself and our organization are at the very beginning of any kind of equity journey around technology. So I'm looking forward to this presentation. I'm very happy to hear today from our guest, Tristan Penn from INTEN, who is going to walk us through using their free download Equity Guide for Nonprofit Tech. They also have a companion resource for nonprofit boards concerned with technology use and equity and inclusion. So you can download that also from their website. First, I'm going to go over our learning objectives. So we hope that by the end of the hour today, you will understand equity issues impacting nonprofits through technology tools and processes that we use. Learn how funding equitable nonprofit technology ensures better outcomes. Discuss the role of nonprofit technology in disrupting existing inequitable models. And learn the role of your board in tech equity discussions and assessments and why these types of discussions kind of rise to that board level. And I'm so happy to welcome Tristan Penn. So Tristan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Tristan Penn, and I use he, him pronouns, and I'm Navajo, and I'm the Director of Equity and Accountability at INTEN, and I've been with INTEN for about, 7 years, 7 years in October. So a bit of time. It still feels like I'm the new person, and maybe I'm just like desperately holding on to that new person role, but I'm so not new there now, so I can't do that. But I've been working in nonprofit for about 21 years, and the bulk of that, the other 14 years, was in youth development, mental health, and education. So I did all that time with a few organizations, few nonprofit organizations across the Midwest and the the West Coast, and so. Come with a lot of experiences. I'm sure we all do that work in nonprofit, but I am so happy to be here and, present on our guide for technology, our nonprofit guide for technology, and also any questions that may come up for you all too, and just be in discussion and dialogue with you all about things that are going on with everyone. So happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to welcome you too. Can you tell us a little bit more about INTEN?
Yeah, absolutely. So NTEN is an organization, it's a national nonprofit that we don't have a lot of times nonprofits have like a direct service arm. So like the Humane Society has the place where you go where you look at the animals, and that's their direct service point. We all know what that is. And NTEN doesn't really have that. Our service point is helping other nonprofits. So that's the cool thing. We're a capacity building nonprofit for the sector. through the lens of tech. So what we do is, and before y'all joined the call, Carolyn and I were talking, and Carolyn identified herself as an accidental techie, and that's really the types of folks that we engage with, and maybe not accidental techie, but just accidental insert whatever role that you went into, because we've all had that story that's like, oh gosh, well, I'm the operations director, but like I just came in as like the volunteer coordinator, and like all of a sudden I assumed this role, and I had to learn as I went and build the plane as I go. And we all have those roles and experiences that we've had. And that's where N10 steps in. 21 years ago, N10, or actually more than 21 years now, I believe it's around 23 years ago, N10 decided, with technology in particular, that like folks were, you know, the internet and like all of this really great tech was happening at around 2000, and these folks were learning as they went, and they wanted to create a collective and a community resource for folks to get together and learn from each other and provide any sort of training, insight, collective training that they could. And so N10 was born. And so from that accidental techie mantra or belief, we've expanded, and now we do everything through the layer of tech, but it's like tech touches so much more than just the IT director, right? And so, as an operations director, as a CEO, as the programs director, as in any level and any role, we're technologists. We engage and interact with technology, and it's incumbent upon us to stay up to date and also be in community with other folks who are in our similar roles and have similar experiences. And that's what N10 does. We provide resources, we provide community. We have an online forum for all sorts of folks that are in different roles, and it's fairly active. We have tech clubs that happen in person across the country, at in a host of cities. And I will say our big event that we put on each year is our NTC, which is the Nonprofit Technology Conference. It's in Detroit. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for plugging that in. And it's in Detroit this year. It brings around like 3,000 nonprofit folks from around the country to come together and talk about the things that are important. Attend sessions all through the lens of tech. Sometimes it's very broad and rooted in advocacy, and other times it's very particular and granular about like how did we merge or transition from one CRM to another, and what were the lessons learned and the things that we really succeeded on. So it covers everything too. So I know I'm not a tech person. I told Amy 7 years ago, I'm like, I just want to be clear. Like, I am so not a tech person. I am a like child youth development programs person. And they were like, that's what we need, because we're all tech people and we need folks that like are able to not only work with the community, but really have a lot of their nonprofit experience rooted in community work. And so that's how I came about. And now I've become an accidental techie just by like being at N10. So that's what we do.
And I will put in a plug for that conference, the NTC conference. I've been several years, but last year, this past year in Baltimore was just fantastic. As Tristan said, there's a bunch of all different types of sessions on all different types of topics. It's member driven, so members vote on what the sessions are going to be and who the speakers are. There's always amazing keynote speakers, so I can recommend that in Detroit in March. That's the one thing I might not recommend is Detroit in March, but it's going to be a warm gathering of people. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So Carolyn Woodard, I am the Director of Marketing and Outreach at Community IT. And I was telling Tristan, before I worked at Community IT, I was the tech director at a large international nonprofit. So I have seen both sides of the kind of technology questions. And a little bit more about Community IT. We're a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. We provide outsourced IT support exclusively to nonprofits. Our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology technology. We are big fans of what well-managed tech can do for your nonprofit and for your mission. We serve nonprofits across the United States. We've been doing it for almost 25 years. Next year is our anniversary. We are technology experts. We are consistently given an MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor we received again in 2025. I host a weekly podcast on different tech topics for nonprofits. We have this monthly free webinar series. You can also access all of our previous webinar videos and transcripts at communityit.com. You can register for upcoming webinars there. We have tons of just free downloads and free resources. So we hope that you'll take advantage of that because, as Tristan said, we're a community. We really believe that the more educated we all are about technology, even if you're not, quote unquote, the tech person, the better the nonprofit sector works. For these presentations, Community IT is vendor agnostic, so we only make recommendations to our clients and only based on their specific business needs. We never try to get a client into a product because we get an incentive or a hidden benefit from that. But we do consider ourselves a best-of-breed IT provider, so it's our job to know the landscape, what tools are available, reputable, and widely used, and we make recommendations on that basis for our clients based on their business needs, priorities, and budget. So that's another reason, Tristan, I'm so interested to hear about this guide, because when we think about equity and ethics and impact and potential harms to our communities, there really are two big technology stacks that I would say 99.9% of nonprofits use. You're either in the Microsoft world or you're in the Google Workspace world. And so one of the things there's a tension around is we can't really recommend a different technology, no matter how ethical or unethical those technology giants are behaving, because that's really what there is. Like, there isn't a great nonprofit technology stack for nonprofits to use.
Right.
So that is something I'd love to hear more about, how we think about that with the guide. We're going to leave as much time as we can today for Q&A at the end, so you can submit questions through the chat feature. I'll either break in and ask Tristan, or we'll save them up for the end, depending if it's a timely question. We're going to try and answer as many questions as we can. Anything we can't get to, we're going to be on Reddit immediately after this webinar. And that link I'm going to stick in the chat. It's r/nonprofit IT management. So you can join us over there. And you can join us there at any time. We post different articles and resources for the community there. We're recording this presentation. I will send links to the video, podcast, and transcript within a week. So don't worry too much about taking notes. Please do stay to the end and take our survey as you exit the webinar, because your feedback really helps us approve and pick future topics you'd like to hear about. One lucky survey respondent chosen at random will win a $25 gift certificate. So that's another incentive to stay to the end and take the survey. A little bit more about us. As I said, our mission is to create value for the nonprofit sector through well-managed IT. We also identify 4 key values as employee owners that define our company: trust, knowledge, service, and balance. So we seek always to treat people with respect and fairness, to empower our staff, clients, and the sector to understand and use technology effectively, to be helpful with our talents. And we recognize that the health of our communities is vital to our well-being, and that work is only a part of our lives. And with that, I'm going to put a thought question in chat. Well, if you could put your answers in chat. So here are the questions. I've kind of thought about this in terms of seen and unseen. So what equity issues around technology at your nonprofit are worrying you the most right now? So what are you aware of and you're thinking about? So an example would be, as I said, like, there really are 2 big giant corporations for technology. So that is one thing that we're very aware of at Community IT. But then also, I wonder if you could think about where do you worry that you might be missing technology equity issues? So unseen things, things that you don't know that you don't know. So I'm hoping that some of that will come out in this as well. So please feel free to, if you feel comfortable, putting that in the chat. I will not name names in the transcript, but it really helps our community when we know we're not alone in worrying about these issues. And so we're here today to start taking steps to address those. And I'm going to, at this point, stop sharing and turn it over to my friend Tristan
Wonderful.
to share
Okay.
this presentation.
Absolutely. I am going to get into it. I love all of these questions too, so I don't have the chat up. So Carolyn, what was the question again? I remember you had said
Oh,
who.
the question for the chat
Yeah.
was
Okay.
kind of the seen and unseen issues. So is there something that you're aware of as you're
Mhm.
starting or on your equity journey that
Mhm.
you are really thinking about?
Mhm.
And do you have any sense of something that's maybe unseen that you have a blind spot around, or it's not on your radar?
Oh, okay, cool. So, gosh, so many. I think we're going to cover them in this presentation too. So, like, please let me know. I don't want to get too ahead of myself too. And I already did my introduction too. Carolyn had done that already, but I just wanted to name a few things really quick. We're in this work together. Obviously, even though we come from different sectors, different types of nonprofit work, arts and culture, community youth development work, everything in between. And I think that's the one thing that I really love about nonprofit in the years that I've been involved in it is that I get to have so many great connections, people that I've met that have now become, colleagues that have now become really good friends of mine that are just so wonderful and dynamic. And we're all doing work that is so important to us, but more importantly, it's upholding our sector in a really beautiful way too. So I just wanted to name that specifically during a time like this where things feel wonky and I just want to name and name it. Things feel uncertain. I know a lot of us have since like February when like federal funds were frozen, things have become very, very tenuous for a lot of us, both like regionally, but also for our own organizations and what that means for sustainability, for contingency, and for like just hard brass and tacks financial stability. And so I just want to name that is like the context that I'm coming with as we, talk about equitable usage of technology too in our guide. Um, it's for you. That's what I said. And this guide is going to cover three sections. Three sections: usage, funding, and creating. So the usage of technology within nonprofits, funding of nonprofit technology from providers, and also maybe from yourself. And then also creating technology for nonprofits. And that's really centered on, folks who, organizations, companies, for profits that do create technology, and any tools that you all may be having with your current IT department, IT director, that maybe you created a cool little thing that, or a big tool that you're using that is custom made for your organization, and how that may look, sound, and feel as you're implementing it in your own work, but also like maybe that's something that you want to share too. So usage, funding, and creating. So that's the house that we're all going to be living in with those three rooms. Um, so using technology in equitable ways as a part of equitable work. So I love to start here because this is kind of where I really love to get analytical and talk about things. And again, I want to also point to Carolyn added the link for downloading of the equity guide. It is much longer than what I am presenting, but also like want to call out any sort of like additions to as you're hearing the information in the chat as well that like are coming up for you as well too. So, and going along with that, if you all feel so called to like, incorporate even a bit of this into your work, we have a facilitator's guide that is a part of the download as well too. It can help you and guide you towards how you can facilitate this for large groups, small groups, or any other group in between. So thought I'd put that out there before. Um, so I think a big part of equitable usage of technology is making sure that you are promoting that equitable usage for your staff, more importantly, your staff, and also your constituents, your community members, any of those things. I start with staff because I had a mentor in the past that's really stuck with me, and it and they provided this, like, if you are wanting to provide any sort of like service, any sort of product, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, and you're so focused on the customer's always right or the community member's always right, that is like not the best way to get like your KPIs or whatever you want to call it, or your your impact out there. What you do is you start out with your staff, because those staff members are not going to be able to implement, work through, provide any service, or believe in the mission and the values if they themselves are not being taken care of in a, in my opinion, holistic way, and also through like a very educational and professional development way. So making sure that you're providing them with a great foundation, not only in the training, but also like how you show up when they walk through the door on day one. So what does that mean? That means not assuming any technology expertise. And that may mean, walking back a few things and not assuming that folks know how to work or use a Gmail account, or know how to use Google Calendars or Microsoft Teams. I think oftentimes folks think that that is like an inherent thought or an inherent practice that everyone just kind of knows. And I think that is a really tricky thing to get into if you're assuming that those baseline things like email or like Slack aren't something that you need to provide training and onboarding to, because the way N10 uses Gmail and like G calendars is not going to be the same way. It may be very similar, but it may not be the same way in which another organization uses. So don't assume even the most basic pieces of technology that you think are like commonplace, that that's an expertise that folks might have. You still are required to provide, in terms of equitable usage of tech, a good onboarding and orientation to how this simple piece of tech, email, is used in relation to the work and the organization. So moving along with that, making sure that the training is accessible. What are you doing with your trainings at work? And when you're providing them and also receiving them, are they captioned? I know we have captions on today too. So is it online? Is it in person? What is the setting? How can we best serve those who are getting that training in a way that they're going to receive that information, not only in a comfortable way, but in a way in which they learn? And that goes back to like assuming that people learn in a specific way. I used to work in education. And I was a long-term sub for kindergarten for a while. And it was just such a beautiful thing to see kids at that level learn in so many different ways, but also be fluent enough to be able to learn in maybe ways that weren't comfortable for them. So I would offer that. The word is differentiation. How are you differentiating your training and your professional development as best as you can as an organization to match the learning style of any sort of employee that you may have? So examine your professional development, examine your training, and also, is it happening only at one point when they walk through the door on their orientation first day? Or is it happening consistently throughout the tenure of their time at your organization? Equitable use suggests and also promotes that that's happening consistently. We all know we get emails about like updates on terms, on like, oh, we just got an update and we're adding this new tool. You all should be like well up to date with that. And if those are happening, providing training for that too. So creating a plan and a schedule that creates a flywheel of training for your staff and also folks that, maybe are using technology that aren't a part of staff. I'm going to go through a few other things. Those were just the other big main points that I wanted to highlight, but making sure that your teams are inclusive, what stakeholders are present when you're creating those trainings, those professional developments. Are there community members that are a part of, the training process, and or are they a part of like creating that structure of training for folks because they are stakeholders? Here's another one that as we become more comfortable, Carolyn and I were talking about like working from home prior to the call. And when the pandemic came about, you'd be surprised at how many folks approached N10 about what are we why are we providing tech for folks? They already have laptops at home. And I think that's an assumption that a lot of people make. And also like if you are requiring pieces of tech for work to get done, then it is incumbent upon you to provide that for your new staff. So the BYOB or the BYOT, bring your own technology, is something that's maybe a barrier for folks who maybe aren't making very much too, depending on what you're paying them, to be able to do that. That may be their whole paycheck, their first paycheck, and that's just not something that is tenable for a lot of folks. So making sure that you are providing whatever tech they need in order to get the work done. Let's see. Let's move forward. Let's talk about data use, the usage of technology within nonprofits, minimizing extractive data practices. And this is why it's at the top of the list, because I know there's a lot of you all at least percolating within your minds about the hot topic now, which is AI. And I'm not going to dedicate this entire presentation to AI. I could, but I want to stay on topic. But I do want to say that this does include AI and probably is the headline of extractive data policies and practices is the first dot point is AI. And a way in which to navigate this as someone who's working in a nonprofit, but also someone who maybe is at the levers of power within a nonprofit, is making sure that you are being prudent and critical of new tools that are coming in. And that means going through with a fine-tooth comb and understanding just exactly how they have their hands on your organization in terms of data that you are willingly sharing and plugging in, but also data that you may not know you are sharing. And that means being very meticulous in how that machine works too. You don't want to inadvertently share any of your constituents or community members' data or demographic data or identifying data to a company that created a piece of technology that you're working with, and now you can't get it back. Or now it's out there and now you have to do a crisis management or a communications plan to let the community know, hey, we may have messed up and there is an explanation, but it won't be good to hear. That's all. We've all been a part of those plans too. And I would just caution folks to ease up on the urgency to acquire new pieces of technology because they're shiny and new and they're the hot new term. Those will come and go. We always have them. AI is different, but it's also still it holds that mantle of being able to create a very shiny luster for a lot of folks. And a lot of folks do come to us and say, we're missing the bus. We are so behind the ball on how do we do this with AI? And it's does it even make sense? Or are you just all hyped up on this new thing and don't even know how it's going to fit into your home? And I've been a part of that where I'm we didn't need this and somehow it's getting shoehorned into my work. So that's my big long piece on extractive data policies, but it really is rooted in slowing down, and making sure that the tools that you have or the tools that you're bringing in are and are what you want to be using, and also you're familiar with and have a deep understanding of what data you're sharing with them. So that means having a protected stored data plan. Where is that stored? Is that on a server? Is that in the cloud? How is that being stored? And how are you monitoring it and making sure that it is secure in all sorts of ways? Um, I think also a few other things, encouraging self-determination. And this is a bit more like tactical. So I know some of y'all are probably joining being like, yeah, these are general like thoughts on things, but also there's practice in here as well. And this is one of them that I think about in terms of the usage of, the equitable usage of data. And that's encouraging self-determination. How are you collecting data from your staff? How are you collecting data from your community members? What does that look like, sound like, and feel like? And what I mean by that is, here's the example I'm going to use. So at the top of the call, and even in my like name right here, it says like Danette Navajo. So I'm half Navajo and I'm half Black, and so I'm biracial. Growing up in central Kansas, there were standardized tests that we would take, the Scantron dot forms, and we do the demographic stuff first before we took the test. Our test was called the ITBS test. And I think it was called like the Iowa Test of Basic Skills or something like that. And that was elementary school. But oftentimes it was only pick one in your demographic. So it was either Black or like Native American. And and it was like 5 options too. So like, I was like, I need to do both of these. I could no sooner rip, and identify one as like more than the other. My parents, either one of them would be upset by that too. And so, but oftentimes I was forced to choose. And cool, fine. I guess for like, clean data on that end in the 90s. But also, I would encourage, what this means by self-determination is providing more options for folks, and also the very like specific, tactical piece of that is when you're collecting that data, making some of those fields, if not like the majority of them, multiple selection. And those of us who work in tech or are like, really living in like an Excel spreadsheet are probably like internally like, no, it makes for messy reports. It makes for messy data when you have multiple selections. But what I would say to that is like, well, that's the human experience. Humans are not like, Excel spreadsheets. They are, nuanced, beautiful, and like have multiple identities that inhabit those things. So when you're collecting that data, encouraging the self-determination where you can when you're collecting demographic data or that multiple selection piece. And, I think that in what we've learned by that within the last 10 years is that people appreciate that. People who have multiple identities are more, feel more seen, and are more inclined to participate in your organization because they know that like this organization sees a whole human. So that's my piece on the equitable usage of data and how it's being used in and out of an organization. And how do you procure technology? Are you spending those funds in a smart way? Is it are you just happy to have the money? Are you just like, how is that sitting? And is there a long-term plan? And do you have a technology roadmap that is guiding how you're, interfacing with technology, whatever tool that you're using? I'll give another example because I love examples and I love anecdotes. And all of us that have worked in nonprofit probably have like so many. But I remember I was working for years ago for Boys and Girls Clubs. I was the area director over clubs of like a specific part of town. And the powers that be admin had gotten this grant. They were they quickly submitted this grant, got this money, didn't know how they were going to spend it, and so they bought a bunch of iPads, and that's when iPads were becoming a really big thing. Bought a bunch of iPads, and it was like, I want to say like 200 of them. They bought 200, and there was no forethought of like the actual, like, we're giving these to kids, so there needs to be like bumpers on them, so because kids drop things. What software needs to be installed on all of them to keep them safe so they're not going into questionable websites. All of those things were not thought of, that I, as like, the one that was now, responsible for distributing them to people or to kids, had to live with, and it didn't feel good. And what did those iPads do? Not because of anything I could do, but like that was my response, was like, we need software on these, and we need like, all of the cases, so because kids are going to drop these. And it wasn't thought through, and it wasn't a part of the budget. And so what did those iPads do? They sat in a closet and collected dust, brand new, for 3 years. And that's what I mean when folks are chomping at the bit to want to fold something in, but there's no forethought or prudence and contingency on how are we going to keep and maintain these and be a good steward of these tools. So I think about that in terms of technology procurement all the time. And I don't know where those iPads are now. I would hope that they got like good usage out of them in some way. But oftentimes we have that story of like the closet full of iPads that we're like, gosh, that like came and went, and now it's not even like an important thing anymore. So how are you keeping them sustainable? And how are you planning for if, any of those people that like are implementing IT or doing that work bounce? If they leave and find a new job, is there a contingency plan on the historical and informational data that person and knowledge that person has as the only sole person in that role? So thinking about those technology strategic plans is important, even more so now than then.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.